Okay, ladies and gentlemen, how to instill effective change management culture. CFOs increasingly act as arbiters of organisational change and driving change, like so many core responsibilities, core crucial responsibilities, have kind of fallen onto the shoulders of the senior finance chief. But what is change? How do you manage it? Is it just about being a good project manager? Or is it something deeper? And is the CFO best placed to lead? And if so, why? And over the next 45 minutes or so, we shall try and answer some of those questions. I'm delighted that we have three really experienced CFOs and finance directors on board. To my left is Talita Ferreira, and Talita is CFO of the BMW Group UK Limited. Sat next to Talita is Tim Pullen, and Tim Pullen is FD for Technology and Digital at O2 UK. And last but not least is David Tilston. David's a very experienced former CFO of Innovia Group and is also a plural non-executive. So we've got 45 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. We'll try and give 5 to 10 minutes at the end for questions, and feel free to fire away with those at the end. But we'll probably kind of leave those to the end and not broach any during our session. Talita, should we start with you? What is the CFO and change management? Why? Why has it fallen on the laps of the CFO, and to what extent?
I wouldn't say it's on the lap of the CFO. I would say the CFO is a board director in a collective board with all the other directors. And whether you're driving strategic change, or you're driving the alignment of the values of the organization to that strategy, or you're driving the change from a reorganization out of your strategy, all of those things really need to be driven by all the board directors collectively. And I think sometimes we have this silo view of what's just in our remit, but it's really that collective view of the board overall and the board's responsibility in driving change that's important.
Okay, Tim, how does that actually work in reality? How much? What slice of that pie of that change pie does the CFO take on board?
I think it has to be a holistic view. Clive talked about silos in organisations, and that's often a good and a bad thing, actually, because you can get people focusing on their specific job, and it can be a bad thing as well that then it's not collected together. And I think very much the role of the CFO and the finance function is to bring some of that together, to take the holistic view and make sure that the overall objectives of the organisation are being achieved.
Okay, and David, you've obviously worked in many businesses and seen many situations. How has change management evolved in terms of the responsibility set?
Well, I think that firstly it depends very much on the sort of change that you're looking at and what the circumstances are. Whether you've got a very large organisation operating at several levels, or whether it's something driven by a specific event such as a turnaround. So I think you have to be specific about the reasons for the change. But I think the finance function very often has a lot of the data that's relevant to driving performance, and making sure that data is set in the right context as part of the communication to the team, I think is often part and parcel of what the finance director is trying to do.
Okay, why don't we throw that or shift on from that to back to Tim and Talita, obviously very high-performing businesses. Where does data sit in the kind of change management sphere? Tim, would you like to start?
Yeah, so at O2, we're part of this kind of world where devices are more and more connected. It's estimated that by 2020 there'll be 30 billion connected devices in the world, from BMW cars through to your fridge freezer. So at O2, our change journey is really about moving from being a telephony company to being one that is at the centre of people's digital lives, making sense of that data, and really using it to shape our evolution as a business. From our customers' point of view, it shouldn't feel like a transformation when you're dealing with O2. It should feel like an evolution of the services we provide. And in order to do that, we need to be customer-centric in how we operate. And for that, we need the data as to how are our customers behaving, what does that mean for our business model, what does that mean for how we interact with those customers and shape our propositions, and ploughing that back through. And for the finance function to make sense of that data, it requires a whole new set of skills and change within the function as well, because this isn't just about financial data, it's about a much broader data set and bringing that together with the financials to inform the best decision making.
I'm sure we'll discuss chief data officers and the data responsibilities that the CFOs face and take on. Talisa, what are your experiences? Obviously, you're a subsidiary FD, so you have a group setting overarching strategy, but you obviously have UK-centric responsibilities as well. And so how does that fit if the group is looking to move in a direction? And obviously, Tim pointed out, the direction of travel that Vodafone, Freudian slip there. Telefonica.
Conflict is good.
Telefonica, ladies and
Competition is healthy, yeah.
Let's go back to Talita, I think, on this one.
So from a group perspective, we're busy redefining the next 100 years. BMW is 100 years old this year, and we have our strategy number 1 next that we're developing now, where there's a key pillar of digitalization within that strategy. Our industry will see enormous change within the next 10, 15 years. We can't really imagine what driverless cars and connected devices will bring. So the future is really exciting and innovative at the moment. Locally, how we feel about data is we really like to have it as an integrated part in each of the elements of the strategy. So we don't have it loose standing because we really want to push this point of collective responsibility for data. We don't want the silo mentality within the data and the delivery of it, and therefore it's a collective responsibility with a matrix organisation.
And so what are your responsibilities, Talita, in this whole sphere and all these many multi-layered responsibilities that people will have across BMW to drive this?
Well, my personal responsibility will be more from the compliance area and really to look at the compliance of the data. Do we comply? How is that working? Marketing responsibility will be to look at the customer and the impact from customer, analysing the analytics around orders, traffic in the retailers. That's the type of thing that marketing looks at. And then from a finance perspective, it's more the compliance-related aspects around the data.
Wonderful, thank you. And Tim, obviously you're a divisional FD within the Telefonica sphere as well. So what are your experiences then in terms of this change that Telefonica is undergoing?
Yeah, I mean, I think a key part of my role really is enabling flexibility in order to really embed change in the way that people do business, to evolve the company over time. There needs to be a flexible approach. We have flexible working and so on that we've had for 4 or 5 years, but we have flexibility built into a number of things, such as investment management, and that's a core part of my role. How you decide what you're going to put your money in, or how you're going to measure it is changing in the world where actually we have more data and more feedback. We can have more iterative processes to invest in things. And more flexibility means that you can breed more creativity, test and learn, feed that back in, and so on. So that's a core part of the role for me. Okay,
David, in terms of change management, how do you use or leverage your technical expertise without that being the be-all and end-all? Because obviously there's an element of it being a project and being a leader as well. So how does a CFO develop those skills beyond the technical, really?
Well, I think change comes down to managing and communicating with people. I mean, so it sort of takes you away from being a core finance person because you're trying to get people to behave in a different way. And it strikes me that there's always quite a lot of communication involved in trying to get the communication right. And if I just give a very simple example, when I was Group Financial Controller at WS Atkins, we had a common system. We had 6 different divisions, and the divisions all did things slightly differently. And as part of an initiative to improve the way we were using our current IT systems, we established a regular meeting to review progress. And part of that just got the 6 divisional finance directors talking together more about what their problems were. And over a limited number of months, suddenly people got more comfortable with each other, started to share their problems and issues which divisions A, B and C had, D and F were already sorted out. And just by communicating, we suddenly started to get a much readier interchange of information and skills, which was actually beneficial. So it was sort of, it was like purely communication that led to breaking down of the silos between the divisions.
Is that easy to, I mean, is that, obviously, Sir Clive was talking about skills that you can learn around and processes you can put in place around communications. Was that easy for you to do as a finance person by background? You look like you're going to say no.
It was something that happened. I have to say, it was something that I didn't specifically set out to achieve, but it occurred. And as part of my career, it was a learning experience that the importance of putting more effort into communicating with people and getting a shared understanding. In some ways, it echoes very much what Sir Clive was saying about getting everybody to contribute. I think it was that process of getting everybody in the room to contribute their own views. We actually found that some people, there was one person who was a very, very quiet, shy individual, had some fantastic ideas, and I just needed to get him to speak with comfort in front of a group of peers that historically he hadn't been comfortable dealing with.
Talisa, you've made a big effort around talent management and focusing on people. So obviously some of the points that Sir Clive and David have made, I'm sure, resonate with you. Could you expand on that?
Yes. So over the last 3 years, I've run a project to really integrate 3 businesses onto one campus. And 2 of the businesses are financial services related businesses, and the other one is the automotive business. So we've brought the 3 businesses together on one campus and then try to change the underlying culture as well, that the culture is more integrative, that we can get talent to move more seamlessly across this campus of 1,200 people. So we've had quite a lot of experience in talent, in trying to understand what drives talent, in launching new company values, which one of them is collaboration. So it fits directly to Sir Clive. And then the other 2 are inspiration and authenticity. So really to speak about being me, being part of the BMW group, the collaboration part, and then being part of the future of BMW. So pointing to this innovative change really that's coming and the talent that will be needed to deliver that.
How did your role did it evolve into that, or was it kind of quite clear step that the people management and the cultural aspects were going to become a core part of what you did and were driving forward?
As a CFO of a German company, you normally take care of the HR function as well. So I have for the last 10 years. So that was also intrinsically part of the role already. And then in this new role, I also took charge of strategy. So then strategy and change and the HR part, that fits very nicely together. So it was just the most logical thing to have me run this big change project.
Talent management and people, is that going to become a bigger and bigger area of responsibility, do you think, for FDs and CFOs in the UK in a more general sense?
I think if you have a risk that your sustainability of your company is at risk because you can't attract the talent, it'll certainly become the CFO's issue because we'll have to pay for that talent. So it's kind of, if there's a talent war going on and it's very expensive for us to get the talent, the CFOs will certainly get involved then in that issue because it's a financial topic. Okay,
thank you for that, Salita. Tim, you're in a very fast-moving business. When you're trying to put projects in place, and obviously we talk about budgets not being worth the paper they're on from day one because the world changes, the market changes around them. How do you manage that in a fast-moving business? How do you deal with the people side of things when there's a lot of swirl around you, lots of things going on?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of bits in there. The pace of change means you need to be geared up for managing change constantly, and then macro things can happen around you. So at O2 we were the subject of a potential transaction for much of the last 18 months. It didn't go through in the end, but through that you have to still make progress as a business over that 18-month period along regulatory process. You can't afford to fall behind the competition.
Did that influence any of the decisions that were being made, or did you?
It does to a level, yes.
Yeah.
So there are some strategic decisions you can't make whilst you're potentially being bought, but there are many things you can still do in the marketplace to keep yourselves relevant. And I think that's particularly true when you're thinking about how that affects people, their careers, how engaged they are and motivated. we had to really latch onto the things that are important at O2. There's a strong brand connection. There's very good people engagement, really connected with delivering customer service. And by maintaining those things as our core, we were able to maintain a low attrition level and keep business as usual going during that period. What you do find, though, is when you go through a very uncertain period, then you'll have a bow wave of strategic decisions that you then need to make. And that's the next phase that we're now going through, is to, what do we now execute? There's the potential desire to do everything at once, but keeping a level head and making the right decisions, especially given the macro environment in which we're now in, is really important.
So I will say the magic word Brexit. So that will probably not be the last time we hear that today. So in terms of, you're talking about the potential deal that obviously made some of the decisions you made difficult or had to be managed carefully. It's what you're obviously a subsidiary of a Spanish group, and Talita, you represent a German company in the UK. So what has Brexit meant then over the past 48 hours or 2 working days?
So 2 days is not very long, I guess. We'd done some level of contingency planning, particularly within the Treasury team, so our local Treasury team and the group Treasury team, particularly looking at foreign exchange and that sort of thing. That's fairly tactical, though, I think. And I think the important thing is that ultimately the decisions we need to make about our business are known and are the right things to do. The timing of those decisions might need to be considered. But probably the most important thing for now is not to have a knee-jerk reaction, not to panic, to hold our heads and understand what exactly does this mean. I don't think that any of us yet know the full implications of it. So getting that knowledge is going to be really important before we decide whether we do or do not proceed with the decisions that we've got.
Talita, has Tim answered everything for you there? Is it just a yes, I agree?
Yeah, from our side, there's a lot of uncertainty. So really, at the moment, until agreements are renegotiated with Europe, we'd rather not speculate on what needs to be done and what doesn't need to be done.
But people are turning up to work and getting on with their jobs.
I think within this period of uncertainty, people are doing what they need to do on their day jobs. And I think that's the important thing, to motivate our teams to continue working for what we need to achieve as organisations. Okay,
let's focus on the key skill sets that you have as FDs, as senior finance professionals. How does that end up manifesting itself then in terms of your responsibilities around change management projects? Obviously, we've touched on that. David, how have you seen that change? I mean, there's been a lot of talk about the people and the cultural side. But, there's obviously KPIs, metrics, etc.
Well, I think just to pick up one or two of the things we talked about previously, at Innovia, who supply the polymer for the new £5 polymer banknotes, we went through a culture change program, which in fact was led by the HR department, not by finance, with a specific desire to try to concentrate on becoming more innovative and also to concentrate on much more of a sort of continuous improvement mindset. Quite a traditional manufacturer, and so we realised we were coming under competitive pressure in some areas, so it was a sort of a need to renew the organisation. One of the key KPIs that we looked at was the staff engagement survey, which we did on an annual basis, which flagged up a number of things that we were not very good at as a management team or as an organisation generally. One of them, strangely enough, was celebrating success. So I suppose Innovia is based quite close to Carlisle, so I guess it got a sort of a northwestern Lancashire, stiff upper lip sort of attitude, and say, one doesn't celebrate success. So we had to concentrate on doing some of the softer things quite well, which was identifying and highlighting where people were doing a good job and actually sort of making a bit of a song and dance, right? And it sounds a very small, simple thing, but actually the recognition in front of your peers actually sort of geared a lot of people up.
But that's about culture and people management. That's not going to require you as an FD to have to go back to your finance function and remeasure or recalibrate. Was that more responsibility for you as a senior director to try and put other things into place?
I think the continuous pressure we had was looking at, and it, to some extent goes back to the strategy angle. What were the strategic issues we were facing? And that's sort of partly reflected by finance and reporting and what have you. But what did you need to do to improve your response to those competitive threats? And the whole effectiveness of the organisation was part and parcel of that. So it's not something you can necessarily measure, from the numbers coming out from a financial perspective. And the way we were set up, it was quite different to the way, say, BMW and Toledo was set up. Finance was part and parcel of the whole. So it didn't drive a change in the way that the finance function did its job.
It was still involved.
But the change was equally relevant to the finance function. And to some extent, say, on procurements and on manufacturing efficiencies and what have you, finance were providing some of the key data so that they could track their improvements. So therefore, from a financial perspective, we were trying to provide the support and the analysis to help other functions improve what they were doing.
Tim, thank you for that, David. Tim, do you have situations where there's change that requires you to kind of remodel how your actual function works? And obviously there has been a lot of change in the way in which finance functions operate, particularly around business partnering. Could you run through some examples of that? That'd be okay.
Yeah, so if I take our technology team, we have some very technical people obviously in the business building the O2 network and all the infrastructure that supports our network. The finance team that support them have really had to go on quite a journey to be able to translate really technical information into financial information and into business decisions. So when you're looking at whether it be investment appraisal or a transformation approach, unless you can talk the right language, unless you can be close to your business partners, it's very difficult actually to inform decision making. So I think for us it's really around how do you get your finance team to be more influential. We've got the data, we can often have the fact-based conversations, but actually being able to get alongside people in the business to drive the right decisions must mean that you get outside of finance and so on. So simple things like going and sitting with those teams rather than as a finance team, going to events such as this, but in the technical space rather than the finance space, so that you can learn more about the market in which you're operating in. Those are all things that we'll encourage to increase the influence levels that our teams are having.
But we've seen obviously business partnering and the finance function moving out and permeating and making its way into the business itself to understand it better. But there's also been a push for the budget holders and managers to take more financial responsibility and to have more of an understanding and transparency around the numbers. So how do those two things work? Because they're kind of going like that. Is that seamless? Are there clashes? Who's in charge?
No, I disagree. I think they're consistent because I think in order to get proper ownership in the business, you do need to have that budget ownership, that responsibility. If you have just responsibility for selling something or just responsibility for delivering something, that can often be, in my experience, at the expense of the financials or the commercial position or whatever it may be. So really, if you have good finance business partnering, getting alongside an owner, at the top of organisations, that's the CFO with the CEO, and I think that works right down through to contract managers with finance analysts or project managers with management accountants, whatever it may be. If you can get that buddying up and that mutual understanding, the business owns it, but finance is influential in supporting that.
We've talked about the softer skills, the communication that has to be driven down from the top, and obviously that was a point that David made around the promoting success became a key issue, and collaboration. How does that work in reality? You know, it's as a senior manager, you will learn these skills, but you're trying to get less senior people to become more collaborative or understand the business. How do you manage that? Because that is very much about them communicating with other people within the business beyond, you know, the odd phone call or email.
I think that's also part of more a wider vision for your finance team. So before our finance team, because it's such a diverse team, it also includes now HR, purchasing, insurance, the strategy team. It was collectively referred to as finance and admin. But HR doesn't feel a connection to HR and admin, and sometimes the other departments don't either. But by calling them collectively now business enabling and development, they all understand they're there to develop the business, they're there to support the business, they're there to enable the business. And this identity with something that really is, that resonates with what they're really there to do, helps those conversations, because it's like a purpose. So our purpose is to have discussions with the business, to understand how to develop the business. That doesn't say we forsake the controls that we need to forsake, but it's to say, how can I make those controls work? How can I use the framework really to enable the business?
But then obviously it touches back on some of the stuff that Sir Clive spoke about power and enablement. You know, if you create a new collective noun or term for a group of staff, they're going to roll their eyes. Some are going to tut, or some are going to cross their arms and say, well, okay, this is the second or third new name that we've had in the past 5 years. I mean, that's where your skills as senior managers then really come to the fore, and are beyond your a different set of skills beyond the accounting and finance.
It's about leadership. It's then about role modeling those behaviors. You know, when you're in meetings, to role model the behavior about, it's not just about controlling the money, it's about enabling the business and finding the balance. It's exactly that play that you spoke about between the CEO and the CFO, making sure that people understand we are there to develop the business and not just to say no. It's quite easy to say no. And so I think once that's role modeled throughout the teams and throughout the management level, then it becomes a walking the talk.
Okay. I mean, obviously we've got very senior people here. I just wonder if we can get a show of hands from people as to whether they feel comfortable with their own people and communication skill set. Put your hands up if you do feel comfortable. What do you reckon, Guy? That's 65%, maybe 2/3 or so. Have you got any advice to the third that didn't put their hands up? David?
Well, I'm probably in the camp of the people who didn't put their hands up.
Sorry, I didn't look across this way.
Because I do feel I can always do better. And I'm still learning. And I'll just give a sort of a simple example from my time at Innovia. We made a small change in the senior finance team, and I had two key individuals. One who was very like me, sort of brash, straightforward, sort of go charging off. And he picked up his responsibilities and ran off and did a great job straight away. The other chap was quite a shy individual, very intelligent, but did not, felt very uncomfortable about voicing his own opinions. And I was sort of banging my head. I couldn't understand why he wasn't moving more quickly. And fortunately I pulled out his, we did 360 appraisals, so I pulled out his psychometric profile and read it, and I read mine, and clearly I was managing him in completely the wrong way. He was very conservative. He liked to think very thoroughly through change before he actually accepted it himself. But once he'd accepted it himself, he'd sort of take off and he'd run with it. So I had to bite my lip for probably a couple of months and give him a chance to work these things through in his own mind until he was comfortable with where I wanted him to go. And then suddenly he blossomed. And not only did he start doing the things that I wanted him to do, but actually because he had such a broad knowledge of other things going on in the organisation, he started to bring things up that I simply had not made any connection on at all. So, he was well worth nurturing, and but he operated in a different style to the first chap. So I think there is an element of different horses need to be managed in slightly different ways, and that's and I in this case I clearly mismanaged this chap for a couple of months before the penny dropped. So
it sounds like you got there anyway.
Oh, got there. And the success was fantastic. It was just it was a rocky road for a while.
Tim, you're in a company where you've got technicians permeating the business, without trying to paint everyone the same colour. Not sometimes head down, headphones in, coding. You're coming from a finance background where there are technicians in their own right. How do you drive this change? It's one thing picking up the understanding what metrics you need to measure and trying to put things into place to do that. How do you manage these types of people?
I think open dialogue between the senior leadership team and the staff is really important in a large corporation. I've worked in a number of different businesses with different approaches to how they engage staff, and I think there's no one size fits all. Different cultures are good for driving different business performance, but when it comes to the ability to deal with either shocks to your business or to drive the change agenda, I do feel actually a very open dialogue is important, because if you're used to having that regular contact from town halls, talking about your financial results, you'll get a consistency of message from the senior leadership down, and a comfortableness talking about things like commercial situations or financials, as well as what's going on in the business, and linking those things together. If you have that, then when things are a bit more serious, you've had a shock to your business or you want to change something, that those communication channels are already open and people are used to talking about things in those terms. If you expect managers who don't regularly communicate to suddenly then be expert at explaining why we need to go on this journey, it's much harder for businesses to do that.
Have you communicated to them about Brexit?
Yes, we have already actually. So we had that ready to go as a contingency plan. We are, a diverse and inclusive company, so we've got a lot of Europeans in our business. So to begin with, really, it's one of reassurance that this is business as usual for us. We carry on, we'll continue to be a diverse and inclusive business, and we'll make the decisions as we go along, as we get more information.
And obviously you've been through uncertainty, and change management programs can often mean job losses, and also during that process you're trying to keep hold of the staff that you want to. So how has that worked out over the past 18 months, 2 years?
So it's worked out really well, and we took a bit of a gamble with this because we focused on personal development. Now some people would say that's a strange thing to do when you've got a higher risk of attrition, to focus on what people want to do to develop themselves to the next stage. For us it was really about instilling confidence in people that we could get them to a point where either good things would happen within the organisation, or if not, they'd have put themselves in a better place from their career perspective. As I say, that's a gamble because it makes them more marketable outside, but we're relying on the engagement that we had, the connection to the brand and the workplace that we have, and those factors together have actually enabled us to have extremely low attrition, which is unusual for a company in our situation. So I'm not saying it would work everywhere. I think you have to have quite a positive, engaged culture in the first place. But it shows that you can focus on the individual, I think, and if they get confidence in the future, they'll be less likely to look around even though there's uncertainty.
Okay, Talisa, one last question before we open up to the audience, and following on from the points that Tim has made, you bringing these three groups of people together. Obviously, there's a softer skill side, but Tim outlined a certain strategy, a direction of travel in terms of how staff been managed. What things have you put in place that are kind of quite clear? What's the strategy into how you bring these groups of people together?
So we've defined 5 cultural shifts. So just as an example, one is complexity to simplicity. We then have two questions that we ask people every quarter to see if we are progressing and how people are feeling about it. So under the complexity to simplicity, for instance, one of the questions would be, Do you feel that you are able to make a difference? Are things complicated? So over the last quarter, was it complicated to drive things forward? And then we get a sense of how the organization is feeling. Are we improving? Aren't we improving? Are we doing the shifts as we want to? And it seems like we're moving forward every quarter, small change, so incremental small change is what we really want.
Who manages the stats, finance or HR?
It's done by employee engagement. That sits in strategy.
Okay, so we're shifting very quickly towards our break. We've got a few minutes spare. I'm sure you must have some questions for our expert panelists here. We have one at the front, a face that looks familiar to me.
Hi, Talita. I was just quite interested. There's a few big themes approaching or looming on the automotive industry, driverless cars and the rise of battery. Can you give us some practical examples of how BMW is adjusting or preparing for that change?
So as I mentioned before, we're busy with our 100-year strategy. So we're exactly the next 100 years. So it's exactly now within this process where we're defining what partnerships there will be. But we do know that driverless cars and the connectivity that you will get from the Internet of Things is definitely a key part of that future. And the key part of it's like a pinnacle of the strategy.
Thank you. Another familiar face, Arif.
Thank you. A question for Talita mainly, but maybe the other panel members as well. Change management is one of the most challenging things in any organization or any business. In terms of when you brought the three teams together, Talita, what resistance did you face, and what was your main objective, and have you achieved that objective?
I think the main resistance that you face is just the word change. As soon as you tell people that there's going to be a change, there's a resistance. We went from managers having their own offices to a more open working environment. Directors have dedicated meeting rooms. We don't have offices anymore, so that's the only offices or office kind of space that exists. We allow people to do flexible working. And I think at the beginning there was a lot of, especially the very first move. So the national sales company had to move into this building, into this new environment without really knowing what it would be like. And the resistance was a lot before we moved, but the minute we moved and they saw the space and they saw the environment and they got kind of their heads around how this could work for them and how it could possibly work for you as an individual, it all changed. So I think it's normal human behavior to be very resistant to change. I think driving a project that has such a long tenure over 3 years with 3 different companies, you need a lot of tenacity and a lot of staying power to stay with the vision. But it's easier. Every single new company that came found it easier. So and communication. I think if there's one thing that I learned is, as a CFO, you think when you tell someone something or you ask someone to do something or you build this is the building platform, why it's important, and you've said it once, that people listen. With change, you have to say it 100 different times and in different ways and in ways that resonate with people differently, because people don't just hear you the first time you say something. So it's really important to hit that message and the purpose of why it's happening and continually do it in different ways.
That's an excellent answer. Thank you, Talita. Do we have any other questions? Lady over there, get a microphone.
Thank you. In terms of change, are you fans of revolution or evolution?
Shall I go?
Go on, Tim.
I think both are required in businesses. For us as a business, as I think I mentioned, evolution is really important at the customer end. So it shouldn't feel like seismic shifts to our customers. It should feel natural for us to play a bigger part in their lives and for them to buy more products and services. But what we find is that in order to keep that evolution at the front end, the back end then often periodically will require transformation. If you take IT as a classic example, you can't really keep a evolutionary approach there, where actually in order to keep the front end slick, you need the stability and the consistency in systems. So that means that actually over time you won't keep pace with the change, and that periodically the transformation will be required. But certainly that differentiation between front and back office is really important.
I've had experience of a number of turnarounds, and in those cases, revolution is good. And I think there's sort of two things that I look for that seem to help create change, get people focused quickly. One is a financial crisis that everybody understands. Two is a change at the top. Ideally, you have both, and people realise that they need to focus and change immediately, and the previous preconceptions go out the window. And I did have a spell at Woolworths about a year before they went down, and my recollection there was it was like the civil service. It was the Titanic. There was no way. The board were fully appraised of the difficulties the business faced, but somehow it didn't permeate through the organisation. 98% of people who worked at Woolworths could never consider the business ever getting into trouble because it had always been there. And so overcoming resistance to change can be incredibly difficult, and I think, as Talita says, can take a very, very long time if you've got the benefits of evolutionary change.
Okay, there's a sobering thought, ladies and gentlemen. Do we have any other questions? Time for a quick question and a quick answer.
So in each of your businesses...
So can we get the mic, please, Molly?
Hi. In each of your businesses, Talita and Tim, that you face, what are the key one or two things that you're doing differently to drive the finance team forward? And it could be processes or systems.
So for us, leveraging data is a key thing. That's how we can add a lot of value to the business if we can make sense of it. There's a lot of debate as to, should that sit in finance or not? But what I'm really convinced of is that we have the skills in order to get quality of data right. So if you think about, the core capabilities in finance. So we're focusing on that as to how we can add value in the future.
For us at the moment, it's about the culture and also then about the new strategy, making sure that's rolled out to the lowest level in the organisation, that everyone really understands where are we going as a collective, what will be the challenges and how do we overcome those.
Thank you very much. So you've got the data there, the real hard-nosed stuff, and then the communication and culture and strategy. So there you go. I think that encompasses, those two answers encompass everything we've covered there, really. I think we will cover data in more depth later on today. Ladies and gentlemen, can you please thank Talita, Tim and David.